Well, hello everyone. I'm Brian Edwards and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar, Microsoft Viva, an employee experience platform. We're really excited to get to show off what we know about Viva, Microsoft's new platform, Viva, and a little bit about today's webinar. It's going to be about an hour long. There's a lot to cover about the platform. If you need to leave early or miss parts of the presentation, we're going to be recording it and we'll make sure we send you a link to the recording through the email that you registered with. And if you came across this webinar through a colleague or one of our social channels, I'd like to encourage you to visit habaneroconsulting.com to register for our newsletter. And through that, we can let you know about other future great webinars, including our next one, which is a deeper dive into one of the topic areas we'll cover today, Viva Insights. And we'll have a few polls that we're going to ask throughout the webinar. We'd love to get your insights on the answers, and we'll make sure that we share those results back with the recorded link to the webinar. And lastly, because of the length of today's webinar, we won't have a question period, but feel free to reach out and ask any of the speakers any questions that you have of what you heard today. So phew, that was a lot of house cleaning, so let's get going. So a little bit about Habanero. This statement, bringing life to work, really sums up the work that we do and how we orient around our customers' needs. And what a huge time in history to really highlight the importance of bringing life to work. You know, more and more of the research that I'm sure you're reading and we're reading is talking about, you know, what today's employee experience is like, and just really highlighting that low battery capacity that everyone's operating from. So we're all exhausted. We're all trying to find ways to replenish that battery power, and we think Microsoft Viva can be part of that solution. One of the ways that Habanero helps organizations replenish their energy is by bringing our strengths in both workplace culture and our knowledge of the digital workplace, especially on this Microsoft platform. So, you know, these are kind of an odd overlap, but the kinds of questions that we think that we answer inside of this overlap and that are really relevant to today's topic of Microsoft Viva and their employee experience platform is, you know, how can we help employees connect to the purpose of their organization and give meaning to their work by way of their digital experience? And how can we amplify employee connection when we aren't all working in the same room anymore? How can we use technology indicators such as how your employees are using Teams to look for signals of burnout or other ways our culture isn't serving, you know, a high-performing organization? We've also been recognized as leaders in this employee experience space, I think partially because of this overlap between culture and technology. ALM Vanguard and Gartner especially have called out us as you know, representative vendors in this space. And they also, both Gartner and ALI, have recognized Habanero for our intranet product, Go. We see Go as a leverage point for all those questions I just talked about. And as we share in this webinar, Microsoft Viva really bumps up against a traditional intranet. It's not intended to replace a traditional intranet, but we'll share some of our insights or our thoughts on that connection today. We are a great place to work. I think this is just such an important part of how we think about helping other organizations, is making sure that we're doing that hard work for ourselves. And so this is really a badge of honor of having some street cred to bring to the table when we're helping organizations create better workplaces. We took that street cred to also just understand and look at what has and how has COVID impacted the employee experience. So I'm sure if you're in and listening on today's webinar that you've been exploring all of the content that's out there about, you know, what the employee experience is like and what it might look like in the future. And we dove into this question in our own research study, and that's available on our website. And I'd encourage you to go take a look at it. But, you know, because today was about Microsoft Viva, I thought I'd also point you to some research that they just came out with in their Microsoft Work Trend Index. And it's a great example of the data and the insight that's coming from, you know, from the ground up from employees about what they want in the future. And these numbers are pretty daunting. These top two numbers, I think, give you an idea of what to expect in the future, this future of more digital experiences. So 73% of workers want flexible remote work options to continue. 46% are planning to move now that they can remotely work. If you're not dealing with that, you're probably going to be a stat in the bottom two. So, you know, 5 times as many job postings on LinkedIn that have occurred during this pandemic. 40% of the global workplaces considering leaving their employer. So let's not be a stat. let's lean into some of these new capabilities to help people have great experiences and keep them in their workplace and inspire them. We asked organizational leaders what they were doing to respond to this future, and what we heard was had two parts to it. First, we heard that they were forming these multidisciplinary teams to really improve the tools that they use to move the organization forward. So finding more ways to get employee insights, so things like Viva Insights that we'll talk about today, using tools like employee experience design to design these future experiences. And then as we saw with COVID, lots of organizations were quite agile, and we called that accidental agile. And organizations are really trying to figure out, well, how can we make that more intentional? And then on the bottom of this slide, what we also asked was, what are you focusing on to change? And so these are the areas that most came up in what organizations were concerned about for the future employee experience. So culture and purpose, now that we're not having that same physical connection, how do we connect to each other in our workplace? Productivity, productivity, not only in the literal tactical sense of how the tools that we use to be productive, but how do we maintain things like purpose, which acts as an inspiration to motivate us. The home and office symmetry, so not working from home, but how do these two environments connect to each other, and what are the purposes of both the parts of our jobs that we work from home and the parts of our jobs where we work from an office in this potential new hybrid world. Community and connection, not a surprise. This is a very big concern for organizations trying to maintain that in this future digital world. And then critical EX, we think that applies to all of those experiences that have been disrupted by COVID and will be disrupted by the future of more digital work. So things like onboarding and offboarding. So where does Microsoft Viva fit into all of this? Well, luckily you came to the right place. We have some great Microsoft Viva guides for you here today. I'm happy to introduce Will Hardy. He's our offering lead for employee portals and has been mired in the digital workplace experience for many years. And Imran Tabani, our managing consultant for our workplace analytics practice. And he is going to be sharing with you a lot of the information that we have, especially since we've been working with parts of Microsoft Viva for quite a long time around workplace analytics, or what we now call Viva Insights. So without further ado, I will let Will and Imran take it over.
Great, thanks, Brian. I'm Will Hardy, and I'm excited to talk about Microsoft Viva with you all today. So as Brian just mentioned, organizations are really experiencing massive shifts over the past year, and really needing to figure out the whole hybrid workplace experience. Employees are facing and have faced significant challenges and pressures over the past year, but that's also brought certain opportunities as well. I certainly know a lot of my colleagues and peers in the industry are either planning to continue to work remotely, and even many have left the big city for other locations and are continuing and planning to work that way. So the concept of the hybrid work experience is really something that I see to be very true, and we really see that digital tools have a huge role to play in delivering on that vision of the hybrid workplace experience. And that's really where we see Microsoft having a pretty bold vision in what they're coining their employee experience platform. So we're going to dig into that and what that means. But if you really look at employee experience platform and what Microsoft has factored into it, they're really focused on the things and the attributes that really impact employee engagement. So those include things like a sense of connection, a sense of well-being, focus on the priorities that matter, building up empowerment and confidence, opportunities for growth, and then a connection to purpose and culture and values. And those are all things that were really challenging over the past year to try to impact and move the dial on. And so that's really where Viva is coming into the picture, addressing and really focusing on those aspects of the employee experience with digital tools that are built directly into a familiar tool to most of us now in Microsoft Teams. So there's a collection of core capability pillars, which we'll talk about shortly, that are really focused on those things. Obviously, that includes the Microsoft 365 suite of tools and ecosystem, but Viva is also meant to be an open and extendable platform. Microsoft has created some strategic partnerships with some major players in the employee system space. And for us, we see a lot of ServiceNow, Workday, SuccessFactors. And so these are all existing partnerships that Microsoft had in addition to focusing on new ones and really painting a picture for how the information and content in those systems can also surface within Viva. Because we know that the digital workplace overload, the magnitude of tools and systems is another factor that has been, certainly long before COVID, has been a real sort of impact on employee experience and generally not a good one with the number of tools. So in Microsoft's recent launch of Viva, and this is fairly recent stuff that came to light shortly before the Ignite conference and slowly being sort of trickling out more and more details on Viva, they announced and launched 4 key pillars. And these pillars are, like I said, focused on employee engagement, and there's potential that there will be more capabilities over time, and likely will be. In many cases, these pillars were existing capabilities that were in the works already that have been branded under a cohesive Viva umbrella. Things like topics, which used to be known as Project Cortex, and insights, which used to be workplace analytics, have seen sort of some new capabilities, but largely sort of a rebranding into the collective vision here. And we're pretty excited about it, what Viva is bringing to the table. It's really filling a much needed space. So what we'll do now is really walk through the 4 key pillars, and we'll start with Viva Connections and really explain what that is and what it brings to the table. So we all know the challenges of working remotely is really the impact for folks to be able to stay connected. We know that stats released by Microsoft say that nearly 60% of people feel less connected to their teams and organizations after shifting to remote work. And we definitely see this talking to organizations and companies out in the market. You're not in the physical office space necessarily anymore, or at least in the same way. So it's really challenging to have that sense of connection. So that's where Connections, Viva Connections, really is honing on, is really keeping employees more connected and informed, making it easier for those employees to contribute to the conversations that are happening in your organization. And also unite and inspire your organization around a central shared sense of culture and purpose. So what does it look like? This is a screenshot of what Viva Connections will look like when it shows up in Teams. So I guess that's first to point out is that Viva Connections and all the other Viva pillars are very much anchored in Teams. That is how you access these tools. So you'll see this particular example is for a fictitious company called RailCloud. So what that has done is when Viva Connections is enabled, it adds another link in the left-hand rail within Teams. So you'll have that right off the bat. You'll have some ability to brand this instance of Connections as your own. So the branded header, the name of the solution, those are all things where you can incorporate your own corporate identity into the solution. And this is really meant to be your jumping off point, your gateway to the rest of the functions and capabilities within Viva. You may notice for those that are sort of up to speed on modern SharePoint and the templates that Microsoft make available through things like the SharePoint Lookbook, that Viva Connections looks an awful lot like some of the templates that are available there. And that's because it very much is built on the modern SharePoint framework. So if you're leveraging SharePoint Modern, and in fact, that's one of the prerequisites for Connections, you're in a good position. Viva Connections is very similar to those templates, but with the addition of some additional capability sets that are being introduced into the mix. So first off is the company feed. We know that connections is all about keeping employees informed and that sense of connection and having that voice in the organization. So we see that the company feed uses Office Graph and signals to pick up on areas of interest to you as an employee and surfacing up that communications content, those conversations that are happening in Yammer, and serving that up to you as a user and your role and your interest in the organization. So that is a big part of Viva Connections, as well as the ability to target communications as well, using the SharePoint publishing capabilities to be able to get communications to employees within context of their role and their interests. Everything that we see in Viva is very much a mobile-first experience. What we see on screen here is the updates to the mobile app that you'll see coming this summer. This will really add that whole communications and engagement aspect to the existing Teams app, which largely right now focuses on collaboration, meetings, chats, and access to files. So you'll see these updates coming shortly, really adding that new flavor to the existing mobile app. And from what we've seen, it's fairly full functional capabilities to really immerse employees. So this really is a win, I would think, for the frontline worker employee base and those that have largely had a hard time accessing the content in the same way and staying connected in the same way. One of the other notable additions that Viva Connections is bringing to the table is the dashboard. And this is another thing that will be showing up this summer in a subsequent release of Viva Connections. And the dashboard is all about providing employees with links to company resources and information, and have that in a way that is, again, targeted by employees and roles in the organization. So the dashboard is created from a collection of adaptive cards, notifications and cards that you can tailor to different audiences. And in many cases, the dashboard is also a springboard to the other Viva pillars that we're going to talk about in a second, like learning and insights and what have you. One of the interesting things about the dashboard is, again, it shows up in the mobile platforms as well, and allows you to really target different employee audiences. So on the left-hand side, you've got things of interest, links to different places, and notifications for one employee, versus on the right, where they may be a little bit more needing information around shifts and health checks and that sort of thing. So the ability to really control who sees what based on who needs to do what is all built into Viva. A lot of the details on the dashboard are still to be released closer to the launch this summer. One of the interesting things around that dashboard as well is the open nature and the ability to tap into things like ServiceNow and Workday and have those HR system and other employee system notifications show up in Viva too. So really that picture of the cohesive employee experience platform and that gateway to the digital workplace. So one of the things that may come to mind as we walk through Viva Connections is that, you know, this looks an awful lot like an intranet and traditional communications capabilities that an intranet would serve. So, you know, does that in fact take the place of an enterprise intranet if you roll out connections? And the answer is it really does depend. It's not a yes or no. Viva Connections and really the whole SharePoint modern site templates that have been trickling out over the past little while here, they provide the base content publishing experiences, and they are really good. It really refreshes the whole content publishing and SharePoint publishing experience. But that is just a base. It's likely sufficient for configuring intranets for smaller, mid-sized organizations. But we've been working with SharePoint Modern for quite a while, and we know to be true that larger organizations that likely have complex content needs or just more advanced capabilities around the intranet and what they want to do, you're likely going to need to extend beyond what Viva brings to the table. And that has definitely been sort of our observations. Enterprise scale intranets are generally complex, and that's where we see intranet products that are built on top of the modern SharePoint framework are able to extend that capability further. There's a lot of good in there, but you really need to extend further. And Viva is no different. It's a base set of capabilities that if you're building on SharePoint Modern, you can extend there. So if that's part of your plans, many organizations are sort of upgrading from classic SharePoint to modern. It's really now looking at the Viva capabilities and kind of factoring how you can take advantage of both connections and the rest of the pillars which we're going through. Brian mentioned our intranet product named Go, and in Go, we're very excited about leveraging all that Viva brings to the table. We built Go on SharePoint Modern, and really the common areas that we see Viva and SharePoint Modern needing to extend further are things like SharePoint or site provisioning and automated configuration. There's a lot of sort of manual configuration out of the box, so when you get to an enterprise scale, that becomes more challenging. Site and page level navigation, so beyond the home page, how do you organize your content and make that easy to find? Personalization and content targeting, certainly as your employee base grows larger, and if you're a larger organization, the need to get more advanced content and personalization capabilities in addition to what Viva and Modern bring to the table. And a host of other rich internet features that you traditionally and increasingly would need to have. And these are things like policy and procedure, knowledge bases, site analytics, employee recognition. These are all things that aren't necessarily there out of the box that you definitely need to extend to build a full-fledged intranet. So this is a screenshot of Go and sort of the direction. We're already incorporating Viva capabilities, and like I said, are excited by them. So really taking what we've got and what Viva's bringing to the table and really springboarding off of that. So we thought, at this point, based on what you've seen, and some may have seen Viva Connections, some maybe have not, we'd love to get your thoughts in a quick poll question here. And would you consider, based on what you've seen, would you consider building your intranet on Viva Connections? And so if you could just take a chance, you should, or take a moment to fill out the poll there. You should see the options coming up in front of you in the poll controls, and curious to get your thoughts. So we'll give you a second there to answer the question. Okay, so thanks for answering the poll if you have. We'll move on to the next area, the next pillar, which is Viva Topics. So another exciting one. We know people spend an awful lot of time searching for information and content that exists somewhere in your digital workplace. We know from stats from various sources, and this one's from Microsoft, and that people can spend at least an hour a day or up to 7 weeks a year actually searching for or recreating information. And that's a huge hit to productivity and a lot of needless effort put into finding and creating content that already exists. And we've got file shares, we've got different digital tools, OneDrive, SharePoint, all the different places where Teams now as well, where content can exist, and really tracking that down and trying to get that into when you need it can be challenging. So that's where Viva Topics is really focused in on. And using their AI capabilities, machine learning, the Office Graph, to really put an intelligent spin on this issue. And really using AI to turn those content sources that exist typically in pockets around your organization into usable knowledge. as well as organizing that distributed knowledge into central topic pages, and then make that knowledge easier to discover in the context of the work that you're doing, in the tools and systems that you're using. So what does that mean? Well, here's one example where we've got a user, perhaps they're a new employee, and they're engaged in a chat in Teams, something we probably are quite familiar with. And in the course of that chat, a particular subject matter has come up. In this case, it's a project called SOAR. And that project has, using Viva Topics, a topic card when it's mentioned that gets lit up, and a whole sort of topic area behind it. You could also be in Exchange, type in an email, you could be in SharePoint, and there's a whole topic management process behind the scenes where AI will suggest topics and you can create them and curate them. So that's a big part of the making this work, and certainly we were involved early on this capability with Project Cortex, and that was really a learning is sort of the curation of topics is really key to the success of all this. But any topic that does exist, you can mouse over that and you'll see sort of a topic card that now gets lit up. And that gives you more information on the topic at hand, the subject matter experts, and also linking to some related content sources that might be related to that particular area. If you want more information, there is also a full topic page that gets curated. Again, this is using AI to stitch all this stuff together. So we've got sort of more information on this particular project. We've got the subject matter experts, those pinned people and suggested people, as well as suggested files and pages. And this content can exist across the digital workplace. Obviously across SharePoint sites and other Microsoft content repositories. But one of the cool things is also the ability to tap into external sources like ServiceNow, where you could have a knowledge base for that content, or other systems. So really tying that all together into one central topic page. So a huge win for especially new employees trying to get up to speed on and don't necessarily know who those experts are and where to find that information. One of the other interesting things that has been done here is integrating other tools like Yammer, which has a Q&A capability into these topic pages, where you're able to pin the common questions around this particular area and allowing users to ask questions and post those to this page. And then the Viva bot will actually automatically go out and mention those subject matter experts to really engage them in the conversation proactively, as they will likely be the folks that might know the answer to the question at hand. So kind of a cool blending of tools here and stitching together sort of this new knowledge management capability. There's also the concept of using AI to stitch together relationships across topics. If you're interested in this project SOAR, chances are you might also be interested in these other topics based on what others have clicked on, what they've followed, and sort of the relationship of this topic to others, and using the machine learning and AI to do all that in the background. There's also likely Yammer communities. There's also SharePoint sites and other places that are linked to here to really bring it all together. And as topics learns more about you, the things you're clicking on, the things you follow, that your colleagues follow, it's able to really build up a better understanding of the type of content to suggest to you. And so over time, this gets and improves upon itself in terms of its organizational knowledge. So again, our learning of this, it's got great promise, but it's really critical to harness it in a way that makes sense for your organization. And that was sort of one of our learnings from early trials of this, is the curation of topics is really central and key to making this all work. And point it to content repositories that have enough depth to be able to really leverage and match the machine learning capabilities that really thrive on that volume of content. So we'll move on now. We're going to move to pass the torch over to my colleague Imran, who's going to be digging into the next two pillars. Firstly is Viva Learning.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will. As Brian mentioned off the top, my name is Imran and I lead Habanero's workplace analytics offering, and I'm thrilled to be here sharing more details about the next two pillars of Viva. As Will mentioned, we'll start with learning, so let's jump right in. So I think we can all appreciate the importance of learning and development as it not only allows us to develop new skills and capabilities, but it's also linked to things like workplace happiness and well-being. There's also an enormous benefit to organizations as these new skills can be applied in the workplace to drive things like innovation and growth. The challenge we face, though, is trying to make sense or make time or find time for these important activities, as well as keep up with the rapid pace of change and disruption happening in our world. And employees and leaders alike really acknowledge this challenge, with almost 80% of CEOs seeing essential skills in their workforce as one of the main obstacles for future growth. But on the flip side, on average, employees only have about 1% of their work week dedicated to learning new skills. So there's a real disconnect here. There's also an important correlation between personal growth and talent retention as well. You know, Brian mentioned earlier, around 40% of employees are thinking of leaving their current organization. But there's evidence that tells us learning can actually play a role in this story, as a recent LinkedIn study found that 94% of employees would stay at a company longer if it invested in their learning and development. So this challenge, or rather this opportunity, is really what led Microsoft to rethink the learning experience, bringing it into their new EX platform. And the intent of Viva Learning is to help organizations create a culture of learning by helping employees discover, engage, and share learning content all within teams. But Viva Learning also strives to act as a central hub for learning content and activities, connecting with a variety of external learning partners and LMS platforms, as well as surfacing unique organizational content. And what's really cool to see in the Viva Learning experience is the curation and personalization employees will benefit from, as well as a set of features that allow employees and leaders to easily assign learning content, as well as track outcomes, again, all within the team's experience. So here's a snapshot of what the experience will start to look like, with Viva Learning surfacing courses or content that have been assigned to you at the top of your feed, already creating that unique and personalized experience I just mentioned. There's also a set of recommended courses Viva Learning surfaces based on roles or content you may have completed or consumed, allowing you to quickly connect with other relevant content you might be interested in. So as we continue exploring the personal feed of the homepage, you can actually see the ability to access content from your organization, as well as content from many leading partners such as Skillsoft, Coursera, Pluralsight, edX, and LinkedIn Learning, to name a few. With Viva Learning also having the ability to sort of integrate with several external learning management systems, including Cornerstone, Saba, and SAP SuccessFactors, but it's not super clear if this is something available out of the box or if premium licensing will be required. Like everything with Microsoft, the devil is in the details. So this is something critical to keep in mind as you start to make sense of this pillar. You'll want to start working through your overall learning strategy and may want to consider what LMS you keep or bring in-house if you do want to make the most out of Viva Learning. So when clicking on a specific course, you'll be met with helpful information, including topics and content covered, length, and due dates, as well as the ability to bookmark, like, or even share course information with others. Similar to the home feed that we just showed you, the Learning will surface a set of recommended courses and content based on your role or content that you may have consumed. And the example being shown here comes from LinkedIn Learning, which actually highlights another common question we get about Viva Learning. And folks are really curious to know what's available out of the box. And while we're still digging into this, it does sound like organizations will still need to acquire appropriate licensing to gain access to premium content from external providers like LinkedIn Learning. So again, this is something else to keep in mind as you start evaluating the overall Viva Learning experience. When opening the course, it plays in Teams and provides a pretty slick view to help you navigate course content without having to leave the Teams experience. You can also bookmark certain sections to help navigate back to a specific piece of content in the future, or act as a reference point when pulled into meetings or conversations, for example. So I've mentioned this a few times already, but something I'm really jazzed about is the ability to share courses with colleagues and team members all within Teams, as This really simple functionality can turn learning into a much more collaborative and social activity, which makes it far more engaging and exciting. When we look at Viva Learning from a people leader perspective, courses and content can be organized to enable teams while also tracking progress over time, providing leaders with much needed visibility around these important learning activities. So here's an example of what that flow looks like, with leaders having the ability to easily assign courses and then track completion over time. And they actually have the ability to assign courses to groups as well as individuals. While this is a super helpful feature, what I'm really keen to explore is what this tracking and retention experience looks like when connecting with external LMSs. Many of the existing platforms out there have similar capabilities and often connect to things like employee records. So that's something that's super important when considering, activities such as employee onboarding or training to remain compliant. So that's a really critical piece that we're excited to investigate and make sense of. So this is just a really quick snapshot of the Viva Learning experience. And while on the surface there are some intriguing capabilities, there are some important licensing and integration considerations to be mindful of. I will say it's quite exciting to see the direction Microsoft is taking around learning. So make sure to check out the public preview that is supposed to be available sometime in April. So any day now. So I'd keep your eyes peeled for that opportunity. And before we switch gears, I do want to call out one of the big questions we get about Viva Learning, with folks really curious to know if this experience can actually replace a traditional LMS. And the answer, unsatisfyingly in some ways, is it really depends. Viva Learning does have a ton of amazing capabilities out of the box and does integrate with some of the leading partners out there, but the depth and complexity of that integration is what needs further investigation. The Viva Learning experience will likely satisfy basic needs and requirements, but for more complex use cases and organizations, a traditional LMS strategy may still make sense, but it's worth looking at Viva as it continues to evolve and mature over time. So finally, we have Viva Insights, which is arguably one of the more mature or developed pillars of the Viva platform, as many of the capabilities we'll be highlighting today are available right now. And Insights is really a core part of this new employee experience platform, as it focuses on this idea of helping create balance at work, driving engagement and well-being. And we know that happier, more engaged employees are far more successful and productive, not to mention living healthier, happier lives. But we also know the pandemic has taken a toll on people. In a recent Qualtrics survey, 70% of respondents reported high stress levels, with 40% experiencing decreased mental health, which is having far-reaching impacts on our personal and professional lives. And really, Viva Insights aims to address these issues head on, providing visibility into how work is happening, while also delivering personalized and actionable insights that act as valuable data and evidence to drive more informed decision making. And these insights and recommended actions come from everyday work happening in M365 and are personalized based on your role and the type of work you do, all of which are privacy protected through a number of safeguards Viva Insights and Microsoft as a whole have in place. And the idea is these targeted insights really provide visibility into those working patterns and highlight impacts on things like well-being and productivity, with Viva Insights also allowing for extensibility, connecting to other data sources to provide a more holistic picture of people's experiences at work by conducting a deeper analysis across the various tools your employees might be using. So how Viva Insights works is that it aggregates data from various sources like Teams and Outlook that are all captured in the graph. And that really provides an objective view of overall collaboration habits and trends. The experience itself is actually driven by My Analytics, which produces individual insights, and is paired with Workplace Analytics, which generates team and organizational views of networks and collaboration trends. Both tools have several safeguards in place from a privacy perspective, including anonymizing employee information when data is processed, respecting minimum thresholds, as well as aggregating all of this data. But we also suggest establishing your own set of privacy standards if you haven't done so already, to complement what's available through Viva Insights. And these personal and organizational insights are incredibly helpful on their own, but we're big believers in pairing this data with other forms of evidence and research, really to ensure we are validating or even challenging what the data is telling us, as well as gaining additional context that isn't necessarily available through analytics alone. And this powerful combination really provides more evidence to help chart a path forward in this new world of work. So I briefly mentioned this already, but Viva surfaces a variety of insights that are targeted to different audiences or personas. So personal insights, which again are primarily driven by My Analytics, deliver personalized insights to individuals to help them understand how they are working, as well as explore actionable recommendations to evolve meeting practices to help create more balance at work. So whether you are already leveraging this feature or are keen to explore the personal insights in Viva, I highly recommend rolling out My Analytics in a thoughtful way, as getting folks bought into this idea of analytics early on will allow you to achieve long-term success when it comes to Viva Insights. From a people leader perspective, manager insights help provide visibility into work patterns across teams that might impact things like burnout or stress, while also helping managers understand current team norms and highlight potential actions that can be taken to better support and enable those same team members. So here's an example of what managers or team leads might see, with Viva Insights surfacing a variety of dashboards and metrics, which are based on common use cases or business goals that have come up. And these pre-baked dashboards and views are all available out of the box, but do require a heavy lift behind the scenes from an onboarding and configuration perspective. To produce these views, Viva Insights, specifically workplace analytics, needs to ingest a variety of organizational data, which includes several mandatory fields and attributes. You'll also need to configure workplace analytics in a way that aligns with your unique business to ensure the metrics and reports you're producing accurately represent your business and employee base. So there's a ton of documentation out there from Microsoft, but we've also been working on an onboarding guide with lessons learned from our experiences. So feel free to reach out if you're in the process of evaluating insights, and we can dig into some of the onboarding tips and steps to ensure you're really set up for success. What's really great about this experience, though, is once these onboarding steps are complete, there's some incredibly helpful dashboards Viva Insights can produce, including gaining visibility into how teams are doing, for example, and if there are areas that might be worth investigating further. In this case, the team is showing early signs of wornout or early signs of burnout. So you really want to make sure that you can dig into this area, and Viva Insights provides that visibility. So looking closer at the team, you can see this group is at risk of burnout as a result of longer work weeks, as well as an increase in time spent collaborating after hours and on weekends. And this is actually a super common use case or example these days, as the number of virtual meetings is forcing work to spill over into people's personal lives, which is contributing to this idea of burnout and exhaustion. And while these insights are helpful on their own, Viva aims to take things a step further, providing actionable recommendations to address this area of concern. So these types of recommendations will pop up for each topic and are all about turning insights into action. So the idea here is to highlight areas leaders can get started on with recommendations that are founded on world-class research from platforms like Harvard Business Review, as well as Microsoft's own research lab, which is producing some fascinating studies and reports. I've mentioned this already, but something we really believe in here at Habanero is supporting this data with other evidence. So whether that be CRM data or other forms of qualitative research like surveys, interviews, or workshops, we want to bring in additional context wherever possible to complement the inherent capabilities of Viva Insights. So as we shift gears and focus more on leader insights, you'll start to see similar dashboards and metrics, this time spanning across an entire organization. And the idea is to gain more visibility into broad work patterns and trends and make sense of how the organization is functioning. So we've seen quite a few interesting examples, like measuring impacts from big events or milestones like mergers, acquisitions, or product launches, to changes in collaboration as a result of reorgs or broader cultural shifts happening in the company. So as we look at this experience, leaders will gain insight and visibility into those broad organizational norms and trends. With this out-of-the-box dashboard that I'm showing you, it really provides a ton of insight into the various themes like how to build organizational resilience or drive employee engagement, or really just make sense of the overall meeting culture within an organization. And this is really one of the many baked dashboards that are available in Viva Insights, with dozens of others available out of the box. And all of these are complemented by the ability to run more custom queries and reports, really based on specific areas or opportunities leaders might be trying to investigate or address. So there's another common use case here worth highlighting that we frequently hear about, and it's wanting to make sense of the change in collaboration that happened as a result of the shift to remote work last year. And as a leader in the Viva Insights experience, there's already a baked view that provides this visibility. So for this organization, there was a 20% increase in overall collaboration hours across the organization once the shift was made in February of last year. So not only does this view allow leaders to see the change over time, but it also provides details about the different tools being used within an organization, which helps leaders stay informed about the systems and applications that are needed to help people stay productive and connected. So these reports and dashboards are all dynamic in Teams, but are also accessible in Power BI with the ability to drill a little bit deeper and slice and dice the data to focus on things like certain time periods or times of the year, or gain much needed visibility into how specific teams or roles were impacted. So I've mentioned this idea already, but the accuracy of this data is really dependent on the cleanliness of your organization's information and ensuring you've set up the tool in a way that truly reflects your unique business. So it's important to start making sense of these activities, as well as cleaning up and organizing things like your Azure Active Directory or HRS data if you're really keen to explore the Viva Insights experience. So while all of these insights are incredibly interesting, there's often a challenge around how to get started. And it's often tempting and sometimes easy to go into an analytics journey with this idea of an exploratory mindset. But that can often lead to fishing, which means you're combing through massive amounts of data without specific objectives or goals in mind, which isn't overly helpful. So our advice is to start with a targeted business goal or problem, explore relevant data and metrics Viva Insights can produce, then pair it with other empathetic research to gain a more holistic perspective of that challenge or opportunity. And this powerful combination of qualitative and quantitative research will provide valuable evidence, allowing you to make more informed decisions around how you can create better experiences for people. So we'll be talking more about these ideas during our next webinar, where we'll be digging into the Viva Insights pillar in a little bit more detail. And it's a bit of a shameless plug as I'll be hosting that session, but I suggest checking it out if Insights is an area of interest, as we'll be talking more about the technology behind the Viva Insights experience, as well as highlight important considerations as you start to make sense of this pillar. So with that, I'll hand things back over to Will so we can dig into how you can prepare for Viva, including the availability of each pillar.
Perfect, thanks, Imran. So based on what you've seen, you could be sort of thinking now about, well, how do you actually prepare for and take advantage of all these new capabilities that are going to be coming into Teams? So I've got a couple slides here to kind of walk through things to consider. The first off is availability. When is this stuff going to show up in my tenant, and when can we take advantage of it? So the first thing to note is that each of the pillars is going to be, they're on different release cycles. So it's not one collective Viva, it's different sort of release schedules and licensing for each. So let's start with Viva Connections. So that is currently available. There's what's called a desktop experience that has been made available to tenants. One thing to note, however, is that this does not include some of the more notable features of Connections. So does not have the company feed, the dashboard on the right-hand side, or the mobile app experience. That is all coming in the summer. So I'll have to wait a little bit for that, and is arguably sort of the more exciting aspects of Connections. In terms of Viva Topics, that is generally available today and something you can leverage right away. For Viva Learning, that is going through it's been through the private preview and is currently in the public preview experience. So as Imran mentioned, keep an eye out for that if you want to sign in for the public preview. And then Insights is also currently available and is generally available in all tenants, with additional functionality coming this spring and summer that'll be added to the mix. So that's availability. From a licensing perspective, again, all sort of different licensing options here, not one license, but Viva Connections is being made available at no additional cost. So for all tenant and Microsoft 365 plans that have access to SharePoint and whatnot will be able to leverage connections. Viva Topics does have a additional cost requirement to the tune of $5 US per user per month, and also requires an annual commitment on that. Viva Learning is a bit to be determined. We know that there will be a cost for access to content from the various different partner content course providers, as well as Microsoft's own LinkedIn Learning. So as far as we know, there will be no changes there. Likely the base Viva learning component, the way it's displayed in Teams, however, that's still up in there in terms of the costing there. From an insights point of view, again, no additional costs for the personal insights that you can take advantage of today. The leader and the manager insights that Imran spoke to will require workplace analytics licensing. So those are the licensing implications. How might Viva impact your digital workplace roadmap? Well, I think there's potentially quite a bit of impact. You really is now really a good time to really assess your roadmap based on what you've seen. How does Viva make an impact on things you had planned? So an obvious example of that might be, a learning management system, or other applications like that has obvious overlap with Viva. So really that chance to kind of look at your roadmap and now sort of work Viva into your plans. Secondly is really elevating Teams as a broader platform. We've all used, or likely all used, Teams as that place for collaboration and meetings and chat. And we really are seeing, even before Viva, Teams really taking on that role with the ability to add in custom apps and really being that place where employees are spending a lot of their work days, being that platform. And adding in Viva is going to make that even more so. Budgeting for additional Viva licensing component, particularly topics, exciting capability, but does come with a cost. So making sure you're working that into your budgets if it's something you want to take advantage of. And then really taking the time now to accelerate the building blocks or prerequisites for leveraging all the Viva capabilities. So examples of that is, in Viva Connections, if you like the social aspects of it, that requires Yammer. So you're going to want to, and one of the prerequisites is to have Yammer deployed and up and running in your organization first. So yeah, moving on, really wanted to get a sense for, based on what you've seen, ask our next poll question here, and that is, does Viva impact your digital workplace roadmap plans? So super interested in based on what you've seen, how it impacts yourself. So we'll give you a few moments here to respond to the poll question. Okay, so thanks for answering the poll if you did. And next topic area is, and the last few slides here are all about how to get started. We've talked about when it's going to become available, what the license implementations are, but for each pillar, there are things you could do today to really prepare yourself, or for deploying connections or evaluating whether it's right for you. So first, Viva Connections. The move to modern SharePoint is a really critical one to take advantage of it. It is really built on top of and assumes that you are leveraging modern SharePoint sites. So we do have many customers that are still leveraging classic SharePoint sites, or perhaps are still in on-prem. So plotting a move to modern SharePoint is one to get moving on. Launching Yammer, again, if you want to take advantage of the social capabilities, a key step. And then setting up what's called a home site is one of the prerequisites as well, so that connections can show up inside of your Teams environment. Next up is topics. Very exciting set of capabilities, but our learnings from early interactions with topics is that you really need to sort of plan for how it's going to show up in your organization, the knowledge repositories is going to be pointed at. So we do recommend an envisioning workshop up front to really educate stakeholders and explore the benefits, and then also take advantage of the capability to have a proof of concept to test out both Viva topics and Microsoft Syntax and other related capability to really dig into that with your stakeholders in advance of a rollout.
And from a learning perspective, we've hinted at a few of these ideas already, but first you're going to want to make sense there's a clear vision and strategy from a learning perspective within your organization. And now is a great time to bring key stakeholders together to make sense of Viva Learning to see if it is the right fit for your organization. And on top of that, you'll want to look at your LMS strategy and platform to see if and how it can connect into Viva Learning if you're keen to explore this pillar. I mentioned it earlier, looking at the complexity of the integration and potentially learning content that you have access to through LinkedIn Learning or other providers is also part of the strategy that you'll want to be thinking about when considering Viva Learning. From an insights perspective, there's a handful of ways you can get started today. And first, if you've made the move to Exchange Online, I mentioned enabling My Analytics in a sort of a thoughtful way to help surface personalized individual insights for your employees. And once that's done, you can actually install the Insights app today in Teams. And for organizations that are leveraging workplace analytics, you'll immediately see manager and leader insights show up as well. But we also appreciate there are some folks and organizations still trying to make sense of what Viva Insights is and the value it can unlock. So we've developed a funded discovery workshop to help these groups make sense of the product and build alignment among key stakeholders, as well as explore tangible business opportunities or use cases Viva Insights might be able to support. So if this feels like the right next step for you, please reach out and we can chat more about what that might look like for your organization. So we've covered a lot over the past hour or so and appreciate there might be some questions or curiosity around how to take advantage of some of the programs or places to get started that we just mentioned. So we've included our contact information if you want to reach out or even have any thoughts or feedback, as we'd really love to hear from you. But that's all for us today. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.